Hey, good morning. Just had to take a break from last night. Once you get all those academic guys in the same place, there tends to be a lot of alcohol involved, and there's nothing louder actually than a bunch of drunk, geeky guys. And so now early this morning, everybody's still hanging over and eating egg McMuffins, so we're good to go for a few sessions here. So Ezekiel is probably one of the most bizarre prophets. Just an extraordinarily strange guy in a lot of ways. Does a lot of repulsive things. The comparison between Ezekiel and Jeremiah is necessary. They're both contemporaries, and so Ezekiel and Jeremiah both are teaching and preaching, if you will, to the same group of people. And so they sometimes lean in similar directions. And so, for example, in Jeremiah, I noted that one of the things that Jeremiah does is he attacks the temple theme, the false confidence in the temple. And the same thing happens with Ezekiel, except Ezekiel sort of gives you more of a reason to believe him. In the midst of the judgments on Judah and Jerusalem, the first 24 chapters, you get right in the middle of it almost, one of the most devastating visions that occurs, and that is the Spirit of God actually coming out of the temple and leaving the temple. What's really shocking about this, and what's meant to shock in the book of Jeremiah, is that no one notices. God is so profoundly irrelevant at this point in Judah's history that no one notices that he's not there. And so it's a very indicting sort of vision in that sense. As you move oracles against the nations, like in Isaiah and in Jeremiah, also appear here in the middle of the book of Ezekiel. And Ezekiel's interaction with non-Israelite entities is significant. God shows up, for example, in the very first chapter on the banks of the river Kebar, in this massive entourage, very bizarre sorts of stuff. Discovery Channel loves to make this like an ancient Near Eastern attestation to UFOs and things of that nature. But ancient Near Eastern iconography makes it very, very clear that what's happening there is that in the ancient Near East, this is how a deity would show up in royal style, and this is exactly what seems to be the case with Yahweh in this setting. And so this kind of thing is the stuff of what the first chapter is made of. From the oracles against the nations, then, in the first chapter, by the way, appears on the banks of the river Kavar, which is in Babylon. So Yahweh shows up in royal style in this off his grid in Babylon. And so the oracles against the nations in the middle of the book seem to have a real logical kind of appeal, the same audacious sort of claim of Yahweh's sovereignty over groups of people and entities that are not Israelite. The latter part of the book is eschatological in flavor. Eschatology, of course, is study of end times. It says eschatological in flavor in the sense of it looks forward, and in looking forward, looks forward with great hope that in fact in chapter 43 that the Spirit of God would then come back to the temple. And this is interpreted in multiple ways throughout history. The majority way that it's been understood is that this is fulfilled in the first advent of Jesus in the New Testament. The more popular way, minority way, more popular way of understanding it is that this is there's going to be something that happens to national Israel in the future. God will actually come back to Jerusalem in some literalistic sort of read. Very popular sense, though. And that is the book of Ezekiel. We move on to Daniel in your English Bibles. All right, so Daniel is a significant book in the English Old Testament. Is placed in the prophets. In the Hebrew Bible, is placed in the writings. A very intriguing book, an apocalyptic work in some very real way. Dating the book has always been a point of contention with regard to a possible exilic, post-exilic rather, writing within more conservative circles and within less conservative circles, more Maccabean dating has been applied to the book. The book itself is absolutely riddled with the best stories in the world. It seems like of course the fantastic story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the three servants of Israel, and Daniel, and Nebuchadnezzar. If you have kids and they watch VeggieTales, it's Nebuchadnezzar and the chocolate bunny kind of story. It's a fantastic story, though, rooted in the biblical text itself, with this massive golden image and Nebuchadnezzar's demand for it to be followed and worshipped. The other story that was really prominent within the court narratives are the stories of Daniel going into the lion's den under Darius the Mede, and going in because he refused to not continue to pray very openly, very publicly, in a very real way to Yahweh. It seems like the first chapters of the book, the first 6 chapters of the book, the court narrative, are taken up with the idea of a righteous remnant in exile, and this kind of idea is productive in that it presses on the faith of the Hebrew Bible and covenant faith of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it feeds the latter part of the Daniel, chapter 7 through 12, the apocalyptic sort of prophetic writings that seem to be the source of major contention within systematic theology, yet for in the bounds of Old Testament studies, not as problematic, but to have serious political and cultural overtones to them. The minor prophets in the English Bible are called the Book of the 12 in the Hebrew Bible. They also are located in different spots. In the Book of the 12 in the Hebrew Bible, you've got Genesis to Deuteronomy. Then you have Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, which comprise the Deuteronomistic history. And then you have Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and then the Book of the 12, and then Psalms, and goes on. And of course, with your English Bibles, if you'll notice, what we call the Minor Prophets begins the last stretch of the Old Testament. The Minor Prophets are a combination of pre-exilic, exilic, and post-exilic writings. What binds them together is interesting, unique themes. Everything from covenant fidelity being seemingly the most obvious theme throughout, but even that, with books like Jonah are tremendously outside the pale of finding a sense of covenant fidelity within Jonah, other than the fact that Jonah himself is a bigot and not covenantally faithful, and so they become a tremendous mystery at points. Hosea is a remarkable book. Hosea is one of 2 northern prophets, and Hosea prophesies, and his entire family functions as a prophetic sign to the northern kingdom of Israel. His marriage is a mess, and but his marriage to his wife Gomer, the children they produce, with these really indicting names: Jezreel, the place of slaughter for the northern kingdom, the Loa Ruhama, which is you're no longer loved, Loami, you're no longer my people. All these indicting sort of names. The entirety of his family, his marriage, and everything is functions as a prophetic sign to the northern kingdom of Israel. And carries on through the first prophetic cycle, second prophetic cycle, chapter 11 through chapter 14, as well as the latter part of the book itself that ends with a wisdom saying. Joel, again, a very difficult book to locate in history. We're not given enough information. Typically, the balance is between the 9th century and a post-exilic book around the 5th century. I like the post-exilic dating myself. Of course, one of the most significant elements literarily of Job is this massive locust plague that he talks about in the first chapter. It seems to be spoken about in retrospect, aiming at filling out and defining the day of the Lord in chapter 2, which is in fact a military sort of a day where God's enemies are triumphed by God and His armies. Of course, the ironic thing here is for any Hebrew reader would be that Israel looks like God's enemies, Babylon looks like God's army, and so this is part of the prophetic reality, though, of a very rebellious and covenantally unfaithful Israel. The book of Amos is the other northern prophet. You can remember the northern prophets with the acronym HA with Hosea and Amos. Amos begins with oracles against the nations, and then once again demonstrates that there's this sense of covenant infidelity within Israel that makes Israel, puts Israel in enemy position with Yahweh, so that you've got these oracles to the nations all around them, starting sort of in moving in a circumference geographically around Israel from roughly the northeast all the way down to the southeast. Then culminates in judgment speeches against both Judah and Israel herself, the northern kingdom of Israel herself. If you remember, after the split, the kingdom is divided into two places: Judah to the south with Jerusalem as capital, Israel to the north with Samaria as capital, and these folks are speaking directly to the northern kingdom. So the judgments against Israel are to convey a very obvious thing. The obvious thing being that in fact Israel is now the enemy of God in the same way that all these other nations are. And so these Amos moves forward from that judgment against Israel and continues on with the vision reports that mingle both aspects of judgment and hope. The book of Obadiah is one of three books that are directed to non-Israelite entities. So you can remember that with the acronym JOHN. J for Jonah, that speaks to Nineveh, the Assyrian alternative capital. O, Obadiah, speaks to Edom, and N for Nahum, it also speaks to Jonah. It speaks to Nineveh. So you got J, Jonah, O, Obadiah, N, Nahum. So Obadiah presents himself as God's envoy against Edom, and this seems, again, this is almost like this is a post-exilic book that is accusing Edom of allowing, or an exilic book rather, allowing Israel or Judah to go into captivity, helping Babylon actually dominate Judah. And the date of the book is probably is a 5th century book, more than likely. So it again post-exilic in its orientation. The book itself is just one chapter long, and so it integrates all that's happened in Jerusalem, accusing, again, very accusatory of Edom, and ends in that way. There's really no really gracious thing that's said about Edom. Edom is in big trouble because of how they've treated Jerusalem. Jonah is a unique book in a number of different ways. One of the things that's so unique about it is that there's only 7 words of prophecy in it. The vast majority of it is a story. The story itself produces a very bigoted prophet that doesn't seem to have any sense of covenant fidelity about him. Sorry about that if you guys heard all that. I'm not completely sure why she felt the need to sit behind me. No covenant fidelity about him, and he has no regard. He has complete disdain for Nineveh. The book itself is just incredibly intriguing. Aspects of the book are deeply historical. Of course, the one aspect that's very difficult to demonstrate any historicity with is this massive fish, story that sits in the middle of the book, or the middle of the book metaphorically. But the book itself, again, is consistent with the rest of the minor prophets, and with Jonah being a representative of Israel demonstrating covenant and faithfulness.